Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby, and welcome back to World of Tanks. And update 1.3 has just arrived on the European server, and while I've already covered the whole host of changes to cosmetics and to some of the Season 1 personal missions reward tanks like the T-55A and the Object 260, something that I felt that Wargaming tried to just brush aside at the end of the patch notes was a significant change to the IS-3A. And that is that it's going to become the first Soviet auto-loading vehicle, and specifically, it's going to have the same mechanics as the Italian auto-reloading tanks. Now, the IS-3A is nothing new. It was released in the Advent calendar in 2015, and the vehicle was pretty much just a standard IS-3 that had a better rate of fire, with APCR shells with an awesome shell velocity as its standard ammunition, but it had bad gun handling, and its mobility was significantly worse than the standard IS-3. Consequently, the vehicle had a fairly balanced win ratio of 51% since, but didn't really sell very well, with 30,000 being purchased and played on the European server since its introduction, which actually makes it one of the rarer Tier 8 premium heavy tanks along with the Chrysler, the Mauerbrecher, and of course the Mutant. Evidently, Wargaming noticed the unpopularity of this vehicle, which is very unusual for a Tier 8 Soviet premium heavy tank, and so have revolutionized it with an auto-reloader, something that when the tank originally went into the game just wasn't possible because the mechanics hadn't been added with the Italian vehicles. But I guess the real question that you're going to be asking is this tank balanced? Now, for everybody out there who's already familiar with the IS-3, there are only two changes to this tank. Number one, the aim time. It's going from 3.4 seconds to 3 seconds, which means that it's now going to be better than its standard counterpart. However, considering that the vehicle's dispersion values are still absolutely horrific, its gun handling is still going to be worse than a standard IS-3. Nevertheless, shaving off nearly half a second of aim time from the previous state of the tank significantly improves its performance. Now let's talk about the tank's main feature, and that is its new auto-reloading 122mm gun. The magazine size is going to be 3. The intra-clip reload is going to be 3, and this vehicle keeps its 390 alpha damage, making it capable of dealing 1,170 damage within 6 seconds of the first shot. However, many of you will be noticing that its damage per minute looks absolutely tragic. That's just not the case. TanksGG is calculating the damage per minute of this tank as if you were to only fire when the ammunition was full. And that's because the IS-3A actually has an inverse auto-reloader, and that the more shells you fire in the tank, it actually reloads faster. And this is such a bizarre concept because the Italian auto-reloaders, like for example the Progetto 46, take longer to reload the deeper you go into the magazine, encouraging you to not rush in, burst all of your shots, because then you're going to have awful damage per minute and reload very, very slowly. The IS-3A, on the other hand, kind of encourages you just to fire off your entire magazine, and then to still be firing 5 rounds a minute, even when you're completely dry. So while clearly the damage per minute of the IS-3A has been reduced from 5.13 down to 5 rounds a minute, that's still half a round a minute more than the standard IS-3. But the crazy thing is that if the IS-3A spends about 40 seconds out of combat with decent crew skills, it's going to be able to stack up 3 122mm shells, get into the next combat, burst them off, and then just keep firing until it either wins the fight with absolutely no penalty to its rate of fire. Now, while obviously the good things about this tank are so good, it's very easy to get distracted and ignore the things that are actually quite poor about the vehicle. Number one, the engine power. This thing has a mediocre power to weight ratio of just over 10.5, massively slower than that of the IS-3. And while Wargaming have clearly buffed the aim time of this vehicle, these gun dispersion values are very awkward unless you have an exceptional skilled crew. But you know what? We can theory craft all we want. Let's just take the tank out onto the battlefield. Alright, so here we go, rolling out on Mannerheim Line, and you might be noticing, who the hell is Lunar Wolves? Well, this is actually a test account that Wargaming gave me to be able to trial this vehicle out on the Russian server yesterday. So as you can see, I don't know what this Revelry Say and Lover are saying. Maybe somebody can tell me in the comments down below. Although I did actually have Tanya watching the stream yesterday while I was showing this vehicle off. And she was giving me some quite funny translations. Let me tell you, the amount of Scorpions and Soviet Scorpions, aka the Su-130 PM on the Russian server, are absolutely crazy. But I digress. Let me focus on what's at hand. What I really wanted to highlight from this, though, is that I am playing in a live server scenario. We are playing on the Russian server. This is not a test server, and so that gave me a much better idea about this tank. I thought when I was on the test server with this vehicle that it was not going to be strong enough result for me to be able to get a full opinion on this tank. The test server doesn't really ever give you a true idea. And so I wanted to delay my review of this vehicle, not rush it just with test server footage, to be able to give you a proper conclusion on the IS-3A. So bizarre playing a Soviet tank and seeing 3 shells all stacked up here. It's just such a novel feature for the vehicle. I'm sure that's what a lot of people are going to be very excited about the tank. So first shell, I frankly just mess up the shot. I shoot into the spaced armor of the Super Pershing there. That was a very poor marksmanship by me. However, this one, not so bad, right into the side. And we've still got 1 shell left over. And as you can see, about 10 seconds to be able to reload. And another one right into the side of the Super Pershing. And bam, he's down on half hit points. I have to admit, I'm obviously in a bit of a favorable situation right now where the enemies might not be realizing that the IS-3A does have an auto-reloader, so maybe I had a good time playing around with it yesterday, but nevertheless it doesn't really change how the vehicle feels. So I'm looking for a shot on this T-34, and he's doing a great job of hiding his hull. Nice play there by the T-34, who's actually looks like the T-34's a beta tester on the enemy team, so a veteran of World of Tanks right there. And I feel like this was my first game in the IS-3A on the live server, and I was just feeling like getting a hand for the tank and noticing that the gun handling is not incredible, but it's by no means terrible. So what you're seeing right now is just how crazy this vehicle is at being able to reload at maximum capacity when it's fully dry. Like, that kind of a rate of fire on the IS-3A, considering everything that I've learnt about the auto-reloading tanks from the Italian line, that you're meant to save your shells and only then burst your shells out after you know you can take down the enemy with a single magazine. It's just so counterintuitive for me. It's so bizarre to just be encouraged to fire, even fire mid-reload. Sure, if you're right towards the end with only about 3 seconds left and you know you can wait that extra second, you can wait, fire off the shell and then wait 3 seconds and fire off another shell. But more often than not, I was finding, considering that I didn't have any penalty for missing my shots, so to say, well, of course, there is a penalty because I don't get the damage, but you're not punished afterwards by having a long reload. And so look what we're able to do against things like the Emil, just like bam, bam, it's just absolutely wild. And I've got another shell ready to go as well. So I don't mind taking a punt at the top of this Super Pershing. Unfortunately, the accuracy of the vehicle, showing its ugliness there, this is definitely best played at short to mid or engaged at mid to long against weakly armoured targets. One thing I will mention about the vehicle, though, is that these APCR rounds with their, 1,300 meters a second shell velocity, I think it's actually 1,400, feel absolutely phenomenal. One thing that I absolutely, is 1,400 meters a second shell velocity, and that allows you to actually snipe quite accurately at targets that are moving. Because of course, if you've got a very low shell velocity at long range, then that is an issue when a tank is doing wiggles and is trying to move all over the place to try to avoid your wrath. Right, are we going to try and put one into the Super Pershing there? You'll actually notice that I waited. That was quite a cool moment. So I waited for the last possible second to shoot the Super Pershing until I got the extra shot in. And so that allows me to immediately turn to my right and get a shell into the Su-130PM and then finish him off just immediately afterwards with like probably about an 8 or a 9 second reload on this tank. It's absolutely wild. I think my rate of fire with my cruise skills and the fact that I'm using extra combat rations down at the bottom here, I'm probably starting to pack at least about 5.5 rounds a minute. So yeah, my reload is literally going to be shaved down to pretty much the 10 second mark there, or maybe the 10.5 second mark. Just look at what we can do to this TVP VTU. He thinks, oh, I'm okay, I'll get my tracks back on. No, you're not okay, bud, because I auto reload and I can put another couple of shots into you. And you've got enough armor to be able to pull off some miraculous bounces like we did against the Emil and the Super Pershing. And let's not forget that this is a low-profile tank. Sure, there are other vehicles that have there are other auto-loading heavies in the game. Of course, no other auto-reloading heavies, I should say. But there are premium tanks like the Samoa SM that have gone into the game that are immensely powerful. But of course, those vehicles are quite tall. They have quite a weak turret, definitely not in the league of an IS-3 turret. And the armor on this vehicle is very impressive in a hold-down situation like this. And I don't mind biding my time right now. I'm just biding my time, I'm waiting, looking for shots of opportunity. But you slowly see that I'm getting 3 122mm rounds in this magazine. And so I decide, alright, let's just go. You know, I'm fully loaded. I'm probably one of the most dangerous tanks at tier 8 when fully loaded. So I'm just going to be able to plow through here. And I don't have the disadvantage of when I run out, like in the Samoa SM, if I miss a shot, for then having another 20 or 25 second reload. It's absolutely wild. Alright, so let's see if we can find a shell into the top of the Su-130PM here. And I'm thinking, where the hell is this little Soviet tank destroyer? Where is he? He's right there in that bush! Bam, one. And then bam, a second one just before he manages to get us. It allows you to be a lot more aggressive. And I actually bounced a shell, a heat shell, from the Su-130PM, who's right up in the corner. So I'm going to use the wreck of this Su-130 that I created. I took a hit from this corner. I know exactly where the last tank destroyer is. I'm trying to be able to get shots into him. Well, not shots into him. I'm just trying to save myself right now. I'm trying to bait him into shooting my gun. If I can get him to shoot my gun, then I'm actually going to leave the wreck and then try and go around. I'm going to speed up the replay a little bit here so you can see that he is going to get spotted at the end of the game by the Emil. And for some reason, look, he actually disappears off my minimap. That's bizarre, but he's still alive. And so I didn't fire because I was freaking out at the time. It was really weird. I guess it's because he's so far back that maybe he was actually out of the map slightly in the corner. Nevertheless, a dominant round for the IS-3A, but I just want to show you some highlights of some other games that I had. First up, we're on Erlenberg, and yeah, I'm used on the very same day that I featured Mark Connett's replay in the WZ. 111.5A, I did exactly the same thing to use the same position that he did, and you're going to see that it worked out pretty well. I get into position, we set the A44 on fire from above, we finish him off with our second shell, we look for another round there for the T-34-85, and when you've got such large caliber rounds, did you see the module damage that we were dealing to that tank there? He lost his ammo rack, he lost his fuel tanks, he lost a bunch of things there against the A44. We try and find a shot here on the Tiger P, but we're not quite going to manage it. This tank's just so wild in a position like this. What's the enemy going to do? They're not really going to do much against your turret, and yet you've got an auto-reloader as well. This is the most heavily armored auto-reloader in the game when you think about it. It makes the Progetto 65 even, the armor on the Progetto 65 look weak. And that's saying something considering that's a tier 10 medium tank. WZ-131 just appears up, bam, punishing, and I don't even really feel too bad about breaking the reload because of course, if I'd been in a Progetto 65, I might have actually chosen to just not shoot that guy. But I'm able to reload quickly afterwards, put one into the back of the Tiger P for 459 damage. Well, actually, I've set him on fire as well, and so we... Is that the second fire of the game? Wow, I guess I'm just rolling that Soviet luck right now. And we put one over there, the ridgeline there into the T-34-85, and we get another fire. I don't think I've ever seen 3 fires in 4 minutes of World of Tanks. Wow, maybe it was my lucky day when I was playing this vehicle. So now I want to show you another advantage of having an auto-reloader, and that is low rolls. Oh well, I roll for 380. I could have rolled slightly high there. I'll just finish him off afterwards, right? Now look at this fight against the Borsig. I fire one in on the move, artillery hits him. I fire a second, knowing that I've got an extra shell if I need it. Now the thing is that if I was playing an Italian auto-reloader, I would be worried about firing those shots in. And also, do you notice one thing that's interesting here is that I managed to run out of APCR shells, and so I was actually realizing at this moment that this tank is fantastic if you need to reload heat. When I'm in my Progetto 65, I've got 4 rounds often of APCRs saved up, and the idea of dumping all of those out and then slowly reloading a heat round or slowly reloading a HESH round is absolutely... You just can't do it. You're going to lower your damage per minute to a point. You're going to have to just sit there for ages. The IS-3A, on the other hand, if you want to reload premium or even high explosive, you're only going to have to sit there with a 12-second base reload that, again, with crew skills, is going to get pushed closer towards 10. And so all in all, my experiences of playing this thing on the live server made me realize that without the argument of people don't quite yet know how to play against this tank, maybe they don't realize it's got an auto-reloader on the vehicle, it's absolutely wild, ladies and gents. The fact that you can just waltz in, finish off an artillery with 2 shots, then kill a Comet as well for 330 damage, and then you can quickly manage to reload an extra shell to be able to put one into a T-34 that's advancing towards you. I don't like this reverse mechanic. It just feels as if it's just too easy. It feels as if there's no punishment for missing shells. It feels as if there's no tactics for actually thinking about the shells. It's a simplified auto-reloading mechanic. The only thing that you really have to think about here is who is the next tank you're going to shoot. And the only skill in using this auto-reloader is possibly sometimes waiting the extra second or two to be able to get that second or get that third shell in so that you can unload it afterwards. Whereas with an Italian auto-reloader, you're quite often calculating, okay, am I going to kill this guy in a single shot? Do I need to save 2 for then the next guy? And I'll have my 4th round just in case I get a low roll or I get a bounce on the enemy team. You don't really have that with this tank. You can just plow in, fire your shells off, and then if you bounced, low rolled or missed, it doesn't even really matter. You can just load in another shell pretty darn quickly and finish off the target. And so personally, I am immensely concerned about this vehicle and how it's going to play out as it hits the live server today. I think it's overtuned. I think it should have followed the Italian auto-reloading mechanic where it gets less dangerous when it misses its shells or fires its shells, not more dangerous. And I think it's very bold by Wargaming to effectively playtest a brand new game mechanic, i.e. an inverse auto-reloader on a tier 8 premium tank for the first time. The problem is that Wargaming are effectively taking a tank that had a very balanced win ratio and, in my opinion, making it overpowered to sell more of the vehicles. Do we really need to have more defenders? Do we need to have more Object 252Us? These tanks have 53 and 54% global average win ratio. As I mentioned on Friday, these are the very reasons as to why you are alienating your player base. And the other thing that makes me immensely concerned is that currently the only way I've seen to be able to get the incredible IS-3A is going to be in Wargaming's loot boxes. But I seriously hope that tomorrow I'm going to be wrong and that it's going to be available for sale individually as well. Because clearly Wargaming have buffed this tank to a point where, in my opinion, it's overpowered, and also it's a very novel tank. It's the first Soviet autoloader, let alone the first auto-reloader that is not an Italian tank. And if they've done this so they can try and encourage you to buy loot boxes with a hope of being able to get this vehicle with no other way to do it without gambling, well, I'm going to be very interested to see how that goes down with the community tomorrow. Anyway, that's it for today, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed this video or it was just useful for you. If it was, give it a thumbs up. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the IS-3A. Do you think it looks absolutely fine or perhaps a little too good? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.